Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.
Look, Bumble knows you're exhausted by dating. All the must not take yourself too seriously and 6'1" since that matters. And what do I even say other than hey? Well, that's why they're introducing an all-new Bumble with exciting features to make compatibility easier, starting the chat better, and dating safer. They've changed, so you don't have to. Download the new Bumble now.
What does an 18-year veteran of the tech industry and a 20-year veteran of the military have in common? More than you might think. Welcome, everyone, to the Second Act Podcast, leveling up your life's journey. I get asked a lot about both in a past life and then even now and some of the stuff we're doing about like competition, right? Like people are always curious, like who are you competing with? There's like so many podcasts, and then in the tech space, you know, what's your competitors doing? And I always think about
are there other people doing podcasts out there?
It's just a couple.
I thought we were the only ones.
Actually, it's good that you bring that up because I'm going to share something about the creator economy that maybe people don't know, maybe they do, which is the space that we're in. It's really interesting space to learn about and be a part of. But as far as the competition goes, I think it's important to think about it from really three ways. One is to have the foresight. So you want to sort of know what your competition is doing, but you want to think different, to borrow the Apple expression, and figure out where things are going to go and go in that direction, and sort of place a bet in that direction. The second thing is differentiation. So like what makes you special? What makes you different? Why are people interested in learning about what you have to offer, what you do, your product, your service, whatever that is? And then what sort of separates you a little bit. It doesn't have to be dramatically different, but it could be customer service. It could be features of something. It could be the whole experience. Who knows? Yeah. And then execution, I think, is really probably the most important one. Are you able to execute and deliver on the things that you say you're going to do? And you can just outpace your competition in that respect. And I bring all this up because in this creative economy that is exploding, right now it's a pretty massive market. It's like $24 billion by some estimates in the U.S., which is like twice that of Europe. And it's expected between now and the end of 2030 to grow 6x between now and the end of 2030 in 6 years, which is crazy to think about. I don't know too many other markets that are growing at that rate. Yeah. But our guest today is a creator of style. And I had the chance to meet with our guest in person. We had coffee, and people know listening to this maybe that I am not the most fashion-forward person. I have a pretty standard attire most of the time. And a lot of the things that I pull into what I wear are function-based. If that's it's more about the utility than it is about kind of looking good.
He's got a lot of work to do on you.
It's so much work. But talking with our guest, who I'll introduce in just 1 second, just in that hour-ish conversation, my appreciation grew immensely for fashion and style and some of the things that I, as an amateur fashion person, would never have thought of. So I'm really excited to talk about this stuff as we go through the story. But in this week's episode, we're joined by Alvin Cooper III, founder and head style guy of CStyled, a haberdashery based in Denver with clients around the U.S.
It's a big word.
It is a big word. And for those who are unfamiliar with the term haberdasher, like myself, I had to Google it. It's an old English term relating to men's fashion that encompasses all dimensions of fit and finish in helping men look their best for any occasion. Alvin is a Denver native, so we've had a couple of those now on the show. That's awesome. And developed an affinity for clothing and fashion as a child when his mom would take him to the fabric stores to select various elements she would use in making clothes for him and his brother. Prior to founding CStyled, Alvin has traversed a number of industries in various corporate roles at companies that include MCI WorldCom, Quest, Chipotle, Nike, Cole Haan, very famous brands.
Wow.
Outside of work, Alvin enjoys spending time with his wife of 22 years, traveling the world. Congratulations. That's a big,
Congrats.
That's a big number. Painting and enjoying a scotch from his collection of many single malts. His Boston Terrier is even named after the Scottish island Islay, where 9 distilleries are located. So welcome to the show, Alvin.
Thanks for having me.
I got so many questions just based off the intro.
Yeah.
I'm excited to have you on the show. Thanks.
You bet. And good job, Michael, pronouncing Islay. We were the dog parents that didn't realize that in America that was going to be pronounced incorrectly by everyone just by looking at the word. So,
You helped with a little bit of guidance there in terms of pronunciation, and I like single malts. We can probably go down a rabbit hole with some of that stuff. But I guess before we kick things off, what's your favorite single malt, Alvin?
I would say the Balvenie 21-year Portwood is phenomenal. I will say, though, I have not met a scotch I haven't liked. However, I may not buy it again, but there's definitely a lot in my collection.
Nice.
That's awesome. Knowing that you're in Denver, I mean, we'll have to have a post-show meetup and enjoy some of those craft cocktails that you make.
Absolutely.
Favorite cocktail if you're going to make one?
Ooh, I would say either a Vieux Carré or a Black Manhattan, actually.
Cool.
And then I have one that I will release. It's my own, concoction, if you will. It's the Smoky Cooper that I won't release at this point, the ingredients, but it's phenomenal.
That sounds tasty.
So intrigued. I don't know if I've had any of those or could even tell you how any of them are made. I'm a old-fashioned guy. It's pretty simple, and in the summer I drink something easier, maybe minty, but old-fashions are my go-to.
Definitely a good choice.
Do you have a single malt, John, that you like?
I don't know. I mean, my current bottle that I'm drinking right now is actually Bullet Rye. To be honest with you, just kind of, as we get into the summer, nice drink. But, Blanton's is something I've gotten a hold of a lot, and I'm able to get it on base a little cheaper than some. So
nice.
I enjoy that privilege. But, man, got me thirsty now. I wish I wasn't drinking coffee. We should do a show where we're
drinking cocktails?
Are actively drinking. Yeah. It would be the fastest and the worst show we ever do.
I don't know.
But it would be fun.
It would be fun. We'll do it at nighttime. Alvin, I'm going to get into it because we got a lot of questions. I've got a lot of things I want to ask you, but we don't have a lot of time. So we always start off the episodes with digging into our guests' history in the past, the things that made them who they are today. And so as a Denver native, one of the few out there, do you have a native sticker on your car, actually?
I probably should, but I don't.
You should. There's a lot of people who aren't natives, I'm sure, rolling around with native Coloradan stickers. So you need to put one on there. But growing up in Denver and as a young individual, tell us some of the important childhood memories besides or in addition to you being with your mom at the clothing store picking out fabric. Tell us some of those things that help shape who you are today.
Well, I think back then, there was a lot of fun places to visit. We had some very cool malls like Cinderella City, and I don't know if you're from here and remember Celebrity Sports Center, which was on Colorado Boulevard. So there was lots of fun, cool places to go as a kid growing up. So we spent a lot of time just hanging out outside and doing the Colorado thing. And I think you take it for granted, having the mountains here as a kid and having the sunshine and kind of really the mild weather. You don't realize, what it's like elsewhere. So there was a lot of outdoor stuff. I'm not a camper or a hiker really. That wasn't what my parents were really into when I was growing up. But I think a lot of it was just, spending time with family and friends. And I have a pretty good sized family. So I had a lot of cousins around and aunts and uncles and that kind of stuff. So it was definitely a good time.
Nice.
Don't don't encourage people to come here by telling them we've got mild weather,
Yeah.
mountains, and a lot of sun.
I know it snows all the time.
Yeah.
Let them keep thinking it's
Yeah, right.
frosty. I mean, it actually is. It was cold all weekend, but it's cold, bitterly cold. The summers are
Snow.
miserable. There's snow all the time. Yeah.
Yep.
And you can't see the mountains very well at all from
that's
anywhere.
awful.
So
Exactly.
don't move here.
Don't move here. And with those fun things, Alvin, and spending time with your big family, everyone must have shared thoughts about life and things that maybe you took with you as an adult. What were some of those things as a child that you're like looking back at, like, yeah, I remember that time we spent as a family, and this was like super important in helping shape me today?
Well, I think for me, a lot of it was, I was lucky enough to have both sets of grandparents here, and I was the first grandchild on both sides of the family. So I would probably have to say that I was a little bit spoiled with that. And then I also even had a great-grandparent set. So I got to spend a lot of time with kind of the wisdom, if you will, whether sometimes you wanted to hear some of that wisdom or not. But I think a lot of it was, just about how you present yourself to the world was really important to my family. And so, beside, being influenced by my mom with the clothing, because she learned how to sew when she moved here, because she's one of 10 kids. I think, just the importance of presenting yourself well, learning how to speak to people. I was around a lot of adults because I was, the oldest grandkid. So I got to spend a lot of time with, with the senior, community, so to speak.
Very good. The wisdom of grandparents is priceless.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
So, Alvin, you had that background, that influential time with your mother. And as you go off to college, you take that foundation with you and you have more of a fashion forward mindset. This has never come out on the show before. When I was in college, I used to work at Gap. And then I moved from Gap to Abercrombie and Fitch, and worked there probably solely because of the discount, because the clothes were expensive and I lost more money than I made. But how did that time with your mother and your family influence you in your academic direction going into college?
Well, I think it was kind of similar. My first job in high school was actually at a men's clothing store because, hey, I wasn't going to do the fast food thing, and I wanted a clothing discount so I could dress better. And so,
I love it.
That was definitely my influence. And then I think when I was in elementary school, I remember there was a period where my mom worked part-time at a shoe store, and so I would sometimes go there after school for homework. And so I was always around shoes and trying on shoes and loved that. So so that's kind of become my affinity for, having good footwear. You can never have too many pairs of shoes is kind of my motto, whether that's a good one or not. It's definitely fun to have lots of options. And so going into college, it was honestly not even a fashion thought, because I had been influenced by someone in the architect interior design space. And so kind of in the similar world, just applying it in a different method. And so I loved, the design piece. I loved the textile side, and spent some time in that area in the art world. And then just through a series of not knowing what you want to be when you grow up, after you think you're going to be a professional basketball player, and and that doesn't exactly go the way you would want because you're short. You kind of dabble, and I wound up in some psychology and therapy classes that kind of influenced my love of helping people, and then business. And so I think kind of all of those things helped me kind of be well-rounded and prepare me down the road for what I'm doing today. I didn't think it would, but it all came full circle.
So what did you go into school? What was the focus when you went in, and what was the result when you came
what
out?
to leave with?
I think interior, architecture and interior design, but then I left with just business, understanding how to deal with people and work business and marketing, and understanding the people connection. And I think that is more important really than anything, because, you have to apply all of those skills, regardless of what industry you find yourself in, it's the people skills.
Yeah. It's a good combination. Psychology, art and design, business. I mean, that sort of amalgamation of things is, I think, has led you, obviously, to what you're doing today in some really interesting, constructive ways. But before we get to CStyled, let's talk about what comes after college. We mentioned a number of companies in different industries that you ventured into. Tell us about that part of your journey and then how that starts to lead into what you're doing now.
Well, I got my professional start in telecom, which was kind of random. For those of you who remember way back when you had to pay for long distance phone calls.
Oh, yeah.
I started working with MCI at the time and helped them launch the Friends and Family program where, if you signed up, and paid, I forget even what the fee was, and you signed up your friends and family, you all got a discount when you called each other. And so in part of setting that program up with them, we required all of our staff to dress professionally because the thought process was how you present yourself in person is how you would present yourself over the phone. And even though it was phone work for our teams, going out and marketing the program, if you didn't look good, you didn't speak well.
Wow.
And so that was kind of my initial foray into corporate, and we launched that program. It was successful. And then I wound up moving over to like some business services and account management of those programs. And then my VP was tasked with bringing all of the human resources benefit stuff in-house in one location because the company was all over the country with, different offices and so forth. And next thing you know, I'm in corporate HR managing benefit plans and doing that stuff. And it was definitely never a direction that I thought I would go in, but then it was working with executives and suits and ties. And so it was a good time for sure and very different.
As I hear you make these comments, Alvin, and I think back to our coffee, I must have walked through the door and you were like, look at this lost cause that has just strolled in here with his t-shirt and jeans and probably clothes that don't fit quite right. I don't know. But they say the clothes make the man or woman, and I'm becoming a believer in that based on that conversation and what we'll get to here shortly.
Well, I think it's fun. People always think that, I'm the fashion police, but, I recognize that everyone's coming from a different place, doing a different thing. And so it's, my job to help you navigate that, whether, what you're doing is right or wrong, it just is, right?
Yeah. It's fascinating with each sort of step of your journey. You've been able to leverage that fashion skill you developed at a young age through that relationship with your mom and going through that process and developing an affinity or a passion for style.
Yeah.
And you saw it play out in the corporate world and that job you just mentioned. And did you see that in other roles you held before you jumped into entrepreneurship?
Definitely. Well, and I did some consulting for a while before I wound up doing some work with Nike and then Cole Haan ultimately. And so obviously Nike being an athletic brand, I was a Nike person. I was founded the same year for my first pair of shoes, that kind of deal. So I was always a huge Nike loyalist. And so you move to that side of fashion and it's very different. It's, the athletic wear and those things. And actually that's when I was doing some product training, I actually met a guy that did custom shirts and suits. And that was kind of the kind of bell, if you will, that said, hey, there is a potential career here, because I had been helping guys all along, doing some personal shopping roles and helping them with their wardrobe, but never knew about a custom option. And so, we can talk a little more about that, but that was kind of my foray into this, next step.
I want to go back real quick because I think we skipped over one of those brands that Michael mentioned in the intro. You've talked about MCI, QS, I Can Get, Nike, you just talked about, but we skipped over Chipotle. What was your job there and why the redirect?
Couple of layoffs 2 years in a row, actually, in the telecom, and I was trying to find my way out of telecom, really. And so when I was at Chipotle, I was actually brought in there to consult on their HR practices.
Oh,
and
okay.
and change kind of what they were doing, because they were headquartered here they started obviously in Colorado, and they were headquartered in Denver for most of their existence. And so I, brought in to kind of change some of their benefit programs and revamp all of those things. And so I had about a 18-month or so contract with them in HR. And so it was definitely it was a fun transition for sure, but very different, because I was suit and tie guy, and in Chipotle,
Yeah.
it was very bolder, kind of show up with shorts and cargo shorts and flip flops and, raggedy t-shirt kind of corporate office. It was definitely a culture shock for me. They're like, you're dressed too well here. You gotta calm it down.
Cargo shorts. There's a fashion staple that I haven't thought about in a few years. When I used to work at Abercrombie, that's all we sold was cargo shorts, and the bigger, the baggier, the better. And all of a sudden, I met my wife, and she said, "Why do you have 17 pairs of cargo shorts? No one wears those anymore." And I got rid of them all.
Good for you. Good for her.
Did you also do some Abercrombie modeling, John? Were you on the posters? No, it's just strictly the sales side. Okay, all right.
Yeah, let's not get into that too much. This is more about Alvin and not me.
He didn't have the legs for the modeling, I guess.
That's true. You talk about being short, Alvin. I don't know how tall you are, but I'm 6'4", and probably 6 foot of that is legs, and they're not big. So,
all right. So so that journey that was somewhat in your control, and it sounds like there were events that were out of your control, pivoted you across sort of corporate America in different ways. But like many of our guests, you heard something or saw something and had an epiphany of some sort that pivoted you into entrepreneurship to found CStyled. Tell us, you shared a little bit about that moment, but what came next after you sort of had that revelation, and then what were some of the steps you started to take to make that happen?
Gotcha. Well, what basically happened during that transition is I had worked with this guy on his wardrobe, and I saw how it changed him, the way he presented himself, the way he did his business, and how his trajectory dramatically changed over that course of a year. And I thought, how do I do this as a profession? And I meet that guy while I'm doing some work with Nike. And so I started kind of down the rabbit hole of finding out who produced product and what vendors were out there that make custom clothing, because for me, I had fit issues. And so I was looking selfishly in how to solve them, but then also realizing that most guys don't like going to the mall and going through that process. So for me to charge them to take them to a place they don't want to go was a tough business model, right?
Yeah.
And so once I found, it took a while. I wound up transitioning from Nike to running one of the Cole Haan stores, because they were still within the Nike family at that point. And while I was there, I found the brand partner that I wanted to work with, and it took me a while to kind of build up a clientele. I was running that store, and so, it's open 7 days a week at a mall. And so on my off time, either mornings or evenings or days off, I was growing my client base one guy at a time.
Nice.
And it took some time to kind of transition away.
That's a really important point that I think we leave off sometimes in these stories, is the time it takes. Everyone kind of hopes to be an overnight success. And many successful people will share that it's taken 10 years to become an overnight success. So talk a little bit about how, so you mentioned you're doing some nights and weekends or maybe early morning type gigs to build that customer base. Was there a milestone or a target where you felt comfortable to say, okay, this is it, it's going to be full time, and then we'll get into more about your business and all the cool things you're doing?
Yeah, I would say during that window, it was probably a good 2 to 2.5 years of the grind, with this being my side hustle. Not having a day off, because my days off were spent developing client bases and working with guys on their wardrobe. And I wanted it to be a situation where financially I wasn't dependent on a guy buying a shirt or a suit that day for me to be able to pay my bills, eat, and eat and those kind of things. And, I wanted to make sure that, I wasn't putting all of the financial pressure on my wife in her income to support us during that window. So I was careful with that. And it was a grind though for a bit. And then I knew, that there was a point where I was busy enough to where I knew that it was time to make that decision. And luckily, actually Nike sold Cole Haan, and a private equity firm that took over, kind of helped make that decision for me, because they were closing a bunch of the retail stores. So ours came up on the chopping block.
Nice. That was a good risk management strategy. Well, whether intentional or not, it sort of set you on your path, full-time entrepreneurship wise, and you had the customer base. So now you're helping men feel good by looking good. So tell us more about CStyled and how you've grown your client base over the last, I think you said 11 years. Is that right?
Yeah. It's been now coming up on 11 and a half years. And so, it's one guy at a time. And really the goal was to sit down with a guy, figure out who he was. What does your lifestyle look like personally, professionally, your extracurricular activities, and then help build a wardrobe around that lifestyle. And it could be also encompassing by fit issues. I know, John, you just said you were 6'4", so you have challenges that a guy 5'6" doesn't have, right? Yeah. And so helping address some of those issues for guys was kind of the big reason why custom clothing was the right fit.
Sure.
And, not many of us are the Abercrombie mannequin size, right? And so helping guys navigate that process was important. And so it was just a matter of, how do I help a guy figure it out, and working with the brand partners that I have to provide the product to, fill those needs.
I'll tell you, Alvin, my first experience with clothes that fit really well. I was in Afghanistan. I was on a tour out there for 8 months. And one of my counterparts was British, and we started talking, and there was actually some suit manufacturers there on base and out in town in Afghanistan. And not the greatest place to go get a suit, but definitely a cool experience. But I'll tell you, I was introduced because of my British counterpart to the world of bespoke. For those of you who don't know, bespoke is one-off. It's made for you. It's measured to you and no one else. But I was introduced to a bespoke suit and all the options and functionality and fit and finish. And I'll tell you, putting that suit on, even though it was made in Afghanistan, it was amazing. It was a world of difference than buying, off the rack, or, something that was made for just a generic 44, wide, individual. And it just opened my eyes, and it was amazing, because the more I thought about it and, I wore this suit, I started thinking of all the other options, all the other colors of suits that I wanted, all the shirts that I could wear, all the pocket squares and functionality of buttonholes and things like that. And there's so many details that go into your profession. And I'll say, for anybody that's a skeptic out there of, man, I don't need to, hire Alvin to figure out what I need to wear. I just go to Banana Republic or, some other store, Gap, and buy something off the shelf. If you are a hard-fitting individual, the services that Alvin can provide and the fit of a bespoke suit to you is amazing, and it will change the way you feel, and I guarantee you'll hold your head up a little bit higher. So I know it's an unsolicited advertisement for your services, but I'm a believer, and that's why I was so excited to have you on the show this afternoon, because it's just a cool feeling to have something made just for you.
I agree. And I think what a lot of guys don't realize is that when when I work with someone, I take their measurements, and we'll talk about fit challenges and things like that. But then it's not just having your measurements, it's having the conversation around, how do you actually like your clothes to fit? Are you that, young, slim fit guy that likes pants that are a little bit shorter with no break? Or are you a little more traditional? You want a little more room because you've got broad shoulders, big arms, etc. And, there's different levels of custom, right? And so some of the offerings too, it's not just shirts and suits. I mean, I can do casual things. So polos, t-shirts, swim trunks, hoodies, full zip mock necks, golf clothes, you name it, the outerwear, there's a ton of offerings. So a guy pretty much doesn't have to set foot in a regular retail store for 95% of the stuff that he wears.
Wow.
That he can get through me, and it just makes it easy. And, I'll consult on different options as far as why you might want this collar versus that, or this cuff versus that, or button styles and things like that. I mean, as you know, doing it once, there's a ton of options that, you don't have to know. I mean, that's my job, right? I'm the coach to help navigate through that process. And then some guys get into it and they get pickier, as they go along, because now they have choices that they never had before.
Yeah. Now, for the benefit of Michael, do you do black T-shirts that fit better than the one he's currently wearing?
Yes. But here's the thing, and we might leave his T-shirts alone. I know he's got 30 of them in the closet, right? And we might just do a layering piece over top to give him some other options. But if we do decide to do a black tee, we can either do it in a luxury cotton or a washable wool, which once you go there, you never go back. They're amazing. They're temperature regulating. They're lightweight. They're breathable. They're fantastic.
Imagine the level of our podcast if Michael was wearing washable wool black T-shirts.
It's going to happen, John. I will
through the roof.
Some washable wool, and when I buy a piece off of Alvin's business, and hopefully I become a lifetime customer, and because I just hearing the passion you have for the business comes through in the way you describe the business, Alvin.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also can tell the way that you share your approach in working with customers. You draw in the psychology and the people connection piece, to marry with the style component. And it's just so fascinating to me to learn, as John describing and you describing, the buttons, the cuts, the patterns, the fabrics, all the things that the layperson just probably doesn't ever think about, but can make sort of an interesting difference for all the different people who can't buy off the rack. And like I said, I think at the beginning, I'm a believer just after one conversation with you, and you've built your business. Tell us a little bit about share some testimonials, your regular customers, like the things, and maybe some different use cases in terms of how you're helping folks dress for success, so to speak.
Well, lots of different types of clients. People always ask, well, who's your number one client? And it kind of is all over the place. I mean, the easy guys would be your attorneys, your realtors, your financial advisors, bankers. I mean, those are pretty obvious. They're wearing suits or nicer clothes on a regular basis. And so it's easy. They're busy. They don't have time necessarily to think about, what they're going to wear or shopping. And so I take care of them. But then I also have, guys who are in the trades who, I'm not doing their work clothes during the day if they own a painting business, but their evening weekend attire is what I kind of work on. I had a funny story. I think I was telling you, Michael, when we met, there was a colorblind attorney that I was doing work for, and all he saw, which was kind of sad, was shades of gray. It was light gray to dark gray is all he knew. And so in order for him not to have a boring wardrobe of one color, we developed a dot numbering system, and he had two closets, his work closet and his, off-duty closet. And about a dozen people that were close to him knew he was colorblind and knew he had nothing to do with the wardrobe. Everyone else just thought he had good style because the dots and numbers corresponded, and so he knew what he could wear with what, and so he didn't have just like one color wardrobe.
Wow.
That's super cool.
That is
cool. But he
cool.
knew that he would look good, right? He could walk out with confidence and know that he looked good and gets compliments on a regular basis. And I'll always tell guys, look, our interests are mutually aligned because you're my walking advertisement. I want you to look good, so I'm never going to tell you that you do if you don't, because I want referrals.
Yeah. And even the stories you shared about visiting the manufacturers and some of the experts overseas, it was just cool to hear the history and how a pattern, I think you were sharing a specific example around a pattern from maybe a couple hundred years ago, had this sort of color combination and things, and to modernize that a bit for today's generation of folks buying custom clothes, you sort of put spins on that to deliver, like, I don't know, cutting edge is the right term, but like just some cool factor to what's going on.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah. One of my favorite fabric mills in Italy, Vitale Barberis, 1663 was when they were founded. Going there and seeing the production, seeing the passion behind what they do, and the whole process from spinning the yarn and then weaving it into the textile and all of that. Like I was saying, it was incredible to be there. And yeah, they take inspiration. I mean, no new pattern exists in fashion really, but it's a matter of taking inspiration from 1 year and then reevaluating it and maybe changing, either swapping out a color or rearranging the color order, and now you've got a new textile for fall of next year. And that's a lot of inspiration in what's happening in fashion, and it's pretty cool.
That's cool. The one thing, John, I shared with Alvin was with button downs. I don't know if you experienced this, that they button down shirts, the top button to close the collar, I never button. But then sometimes I like to have the second button undone. But a lot of shirt manufacturers will put it too low, and then it's like just too much exposure. And so you don't want that, or it's too high and it's almost like buttoning the top button. And it's amazing to hear through this process with Alvin that you can even customize the placement of those buttons. It's just cool.
Yeah. And they even make shirts now with hidden buttons.
Okay.
Right. There's a hidden button between the second or first and second going top down that keeps it just exposed enough. So there you go.
Nice.
Yeah. Lots of tricks.
Lots of tricks.
Alvin, I've got two things for you. One, I really appreciate what you do again, and I gave you an unsolicited advertisement, but for historical context, my dad is 6'8" and wears a size 17 shoe. And I remember as a kid, we made a trip to Hong Kong, and he went and found a suit manufacturer that was making them for super cheap, I guess. But he made 12 or 13 suits in one trip and had, 5 or 6 shoes custom made for him, because he was at the time, gargantuan, and they just didn't make clothes in that range. So I grew up thinking I've got to use, somebody's got to measure me and measure twice and 3 times. And it's this process. And so I was delighted to find out that I was actually just normal or in the normal spectrum, kind of on the outside. But, there's a lot of people out there that I know use services like yours or have those difficult fittings that it's just not fun buying clothes. And so, again, it's amazing that there's a service like yours and there's people out there that are literally trying to help people in any facet of their life to try to make things easier. So the other thing I wanted to bring up, and I want to go back, because when you talk about your life in the corporate world and even in retail, and you're starting to think about this industry that you want to influence and be a part of, I want you to go back to the very first customer, because at the time, Alvin, you were retail. You weren't, making custom wardrobes for people. And a lot of times, some of our guests, some of our listeners have talked about experiencing imposter syndrome and feeling like this new area that they're going to go into is difficult until they make the switch. So I want you to go back to your first customer. When you approached them, did you say, "Hi, I'm Alvin. I am willing to help you look better and customize your wardrobe and make things easier on your end? Or did you experience that imposter syndrome and kind of hide some of the capabilities that you wanted to showcase?
It's a great question. I think I experienced that imposter syndrome in a little bit different way. It wasn't that I was approaching someone to have them become my customer. It was they were approaching me asking for help with their wardrobe because they saw and liked what I was doing and how I presented myself. And so I thought, well, sure, I think I could do that. And I have no idea what to charge you. So the first handful of guys, I just did it for free, for fun. I was like, buy me lunch and let's, what's your budget? And let's meet up at the mall and we'll figure it out. And as I because I didn't realize there was honestly kind of a career path, so to speak, for this kind of a career. And so it was just making stuff up as I went along, to be honest with you. And so the imposter syndrome piece of it was more of a confidence. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to make it up and we'll see what happens. And they seemed to be happy about what I was doing and I'll just keep on going. And yeah, it was kind of an interesting process, especially at the beginning when it was just working with, through other retailers. And then when I first started with the custom business, I remember my very first client was actually the fiance of my wife's first employee when she hired her. And they were getting married like 6 or 9 months down the road. And I said, hold on, before you get married, let's talk about doing a custom suit for you. And I was nervous because, hey, I really didn't know what I was doing. And this was for an important day. And it turned out beautiful. He was excited. And then I was off to the races from there. I was like, well, this is cool. This guy looks good. He was excited in pictures. And when you see him versus all of his groomsmen and the fit that they had, yeah, it was night and day. But I was nervous, I didn't know how this thing was really going to work and if it was really going to work and if the brand partner that I had was really able to produce what they said they were. And I've evolved with them and worked with them for now 11 years, and it's been a really good partnership.
Wow. I love the transition or the scalability that you experienced. I think when people are looking at going into their second act, they want to gather a lot of information. They want to have all the details dialed in and ready to go before they do their launch of a website, launch of a brand, launch of a whatever. You're out there and you just say, you know what, let me just try. I'll do it for free. Let's figure out if this is a good fit for you, no pun intended, and a good fit for me. And let's make it happen. And from there, you started to grow your brand. You didn't have anything polished up, and it wasn't a package where you came out and you said, this is me now. You just said, let's give it a try. Let's make it happen. And I love that. I love that entrepreneurial spirit in you, that you were able to go out there and step out like that.
Yeah, it was fun. It was definitely nerve-wracking. I mean, you just don't know, right? And even today, sometimes it's like you get a client and you're like, I've done this over 800 times with a new client, and I still am nervous sometimes with their first fitting. And it's like, you're good. It's just clothes. No one's going to die if it doesn't fit. It'll be all right. You can have it remade if necessary. But it's pretty rare. Not 99.9% of all of the stuff fits beautifully, or even better than they had before. So you'll be okay.
It's your story is so cool because so many people are like, I don't have a big idea to go after, and I'm stuck on the idea phase, and I don't know how to get started. And your idea stemmed from your experience, and it's just sort of came to you a little bit to start the business, and the imposter syndrome or self-doubt came into just like, can I even run a business? I've never run a business before. How do I figure out the economics of this and the process? And it sounded like there was some low risk approaches going on with like friend to friends or, there was 6 degrees of separation in some of the early customers, which is, I think that's how a lot of people start out. But in the space that you're in, and I'm probably guilty of this as well, a lot of people think of custom clothiers, haberdashers as folks who are going to focus in on like the really formal wear, like suits and things like that. John, you mentioned it, getting a suit at the beginning, and Alvin, you've mentioned an example. But in today's world, especially we're all Coloradans here, business casual in Colorado is not business casual in like New York or other, places overseas. And I think what's really special about what you do is that you cover the whole spectrum of fashion, from like beachwear to that formal stuff. And it's cool to understand the elements at each sort of segment of that spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been nice. I just had this one guy that I just worked with. He was like, you know what? I've never had a pair of denim fit right. And part of his problem was if you take your waist measurement and add 6 inches in the circumference of the hip, that's typically how the hip ratio is. So they call it a 6-inch drop. Well, he was a 10-inch difference between his waist and hip because he was a former hockey player. So he just had big thighs and a bigger booty, basically. And now he's got pants that fit. And we're like, yeah, I can do denim. He's like, are you kidding me? Because for him, if he got it to fit in the waist, man, the thighs, it was like he was wearing, some yoga pants, and nobody needs to see that, right? But then he'd have to go up in the waist to get the thigh and hip to fit. And it was bad. So problem fixed.
Problem
It's amazing.
solved. I do not have that problem. I do not have big thighs or a big butt.
You're just tall.
Yeah.
He's just tall. I didn't know your dad was 6'8", John. I thought 6'4" was pretty tall. Man, 17 shoe, that like rivals Shaq. I don't know.
I think he's got like a 22 or something ridiculous.
Crazy.
17 is big and
yeah,
causes some problems when you go out and buy retail.
Yeah. Well, Alvin, I know we're getting a little short on time, and all of our shows end with practical advice or insights for those contemplating or just getting started in their second act in life. And I know a lot of what we've talked about, we've injected, some of your story has elements of that. But if there's one piece that you want to leave our audience with today, who might be just on the fence about things, what would that be?
Well, I think it's probably two-pronged. Depending on what you're going into, finding the right partner to work with, I think, is number one. The brand partner that I have, Jay Hilburn, has been a great blessing in that from a product production side. But then I think more importantly is your personal support system. And that sometimes doesn't come from the people you think it should, family or friends. It's nice when it does, but I think that finding that support system, whether it be the family and friends, but then more importantly, people in complementary industries is critical, because when you're an entrepreneur, you're on this island by yourself, and someone who does similar work with with a similar type of client base that you have is also on their own island, and having connection with them and, regularly, I think is key, because you're going through similar things that you can help support each other through, and having conversations, because sometimes having a conversation with your spouse about a business struggle that you're having may or may not be the most effective, place to have that conversation. But if there's another entrepreneur that has a similar type of business, serving a similar type of clientele, they may have either already gone through that struggle, or they might be currently going through that struggle. And that's someone that you can be in the same space with and have those open and honest conversations. And I think that for anyone is critical. And it's not easy to find, but you've got to seek it out.
That's great. Great advice.
Well, Alvin, I already believed that the clothes make the man, but you have definitely reinforced that within me and hopefully Michael, and I know our audience.
What's that little slight there?
No, I'm just saying.
Hopefully, Michael.
Well,
so good.
I mean, I want to see you in something else. I look at you in black every single episode.
Yeah.
It's,
you know what you get
whatever.
when I show up.
I know. That's cool. But I wanted to thank you for helping us imagine your journey and taking us on for, the ride and allowing us to see that transition that you've made from corporate America into being, the entrepreneur that you are today, owning your own business. And so, man, thank you so much for giving us that detailed look. And for our listeners who are interested in learning more, maybe using you for your services or just getting more information about what you're doing, what's the best way for our audience members to get in touch with you?
I'd say they can go to my website, CStyled.com, and connect with me that way, or Instagram, Alvin Cooper. You can always DM me on Instagram as well and connect and, just have the conversation. Sometimes it takes a while. It's, timing is everything. I just started working with a guy that reached out 2 years ago and just wanted to have a conversation, and now we're finally doing work together. So yeah, there's no rush, but it's about you.
I love it.
Nice.
I love it. Well, I'm
Awesome.
just down the road in Colorado Springs, and in my new occupation, I'm a jet broker. I'm going to need some, styling upgrades, if you will. So I'm going to definitely come see you and have that cup of coffee with you and see where we can go. So thank you for that. But we'll have those links in the show notes.
Yep.
And, for me and Michael, thank you so much again for coming on. And I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, me as well. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. And I love the work you're doing. I've been listening to your podcast ever since your friend Christy introduced me to you guys. So it's been great to kind of hear your journey as well and all the great entrepreneurs that you're interviewing. So it's an honor to be kind of part of that group.
You're part of the family now, Alvin. Thanks for the amazing conversation today.
Appreciate it.
And we look forward to reconnecting with our audience next week. If you're an avid listener or like what you're hearing, we'd love some feedback. We'd love you to subscribe and give us a thumbs up on any of the platforms you're listening on. But man, Michael, great job. Thanks for introducing me to Alvin, and I look forward to next week's episode.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks, John. Thanks, Alvin. We will see everyone next week.
All right. See ya.
See ya.
The Second Act with Michael and John stars Michael Newborn and John Ballenger. The podcast is produced by Seltzer Kings. For more information on the show, check out michaelandjohn.com, or if you'd like to get involved in the conversation, give the guys a shout on their socials at The Second Act with Michael and John on most platforms. Thanks for listening.
Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.